Local fashion. The hardworking farm boy and the Italian supermodel went to get some drinks in the center of Hinckley, Illinois. He barely ever spoke, not even in English, and only knew the Italian word for spaghetti. She was always smiling, just one continuous smile, just one happy supermodel on a photo shoot in the country. As they walked, her leather boots collected dirt and patterns that seemed on her high fashion. Just some tennis shoes for him, with laces pulled into knots so tight he'd have to sleep in them that night. It was summer, and all they had to do was walk down one road, make a right, and walk down one more road to get to the bar. They walked in silence. They sat in a corner table, and the hardworking farm boy pulled out the chair for the Italian supermodel because that's just the way his mama taught him. The Italian supermodel's mother taught her to speak in 5 different languages, none of them being English. She learned some from watching movies, but was embarrassed to test it out on anyone who truly spoke the language. The bartender, who had known the farm boy all his life, brought 2 buds on tap to their table. The farm boy nodded, and the Italian supermodel grabbed a paper napkin from a stack on the table and unfolded it to cover her lap. The bartender stood over their table for a moment, ping-ponging an expectant smile between the boy and the girl, but neither patron would do him the honor of explaining anything. Eventually, the bartender placed a hand on the farm boy's tense shoulder, gave it a pat, and returned to his place behind the bar. The jukebox was playing old country songs. Everybody in the place was pretending not to stare at the girl. The Italian supermodel grabbed another napkin from the stack and pulled out a ballpoint pen from her leather clutch purse. She drew a picture of a cake with a ribbon of icing on top. She began to draw candles, slowly, one by one, and stopped after she had drawn 15. She drew a question mark above the cake and passed the napkin along to the boy. He lifted it up in front of his eyes and tugged on his right earlobe while she sat there, smiling. After a few moments, he shook his head and grabbed the pen from between the Italian supermodel's fingers. Her nails were painted with a sheer gloss and made a pleasing sound as they tapped against the table. The boy drew 3 more candles in response to her age question, lying about that 3rd one. The farm boy was hard at work on the farm when he first saw the Italian supermodel, and he knew she was something else right away, or someone else, at least. Definitely not anyone from Hinckley, and probably not a farmer. She was walking with a man wearing a leather coat, and the 2 of them were standing to the side of a silo on the farm boy's family's farm. They were looking at the silo for so long that eventually the 2 people just seemed to become a part of the scenery, like they had always been there, staring at that silo like it was the absolute meaning of life, God himself housing grain. With the napkin back in her Italian hands, the girl flipped it over to begin a new drawing. It seemed within the blink of an eye she had already finished half of her beer, and the boy, noticing this, took his first sip. As she drew, the boy noticed how her face seemed to close in on itself, how it got smaller, tighter, her eyes drawing closer together, her nose shrinking between scrunched-up cheeks. He didn't think beautiful women were ever supposed to look so small, for their features to ever become so little. He wondered if the palm of his hand could envelop her whole face. She drew a cow with spots and a bucket underneath, lying on a patch of grass. The boy didn't know what to make of this one. Was it another question, or questions all she had? He nodded, said yes very quietly, and then wrote yes in the center of the cow. "Moo," she said, and pointed to him. Again, he nodded, yes. Was she making fun of him? Probably. The boy wanted to take a new napkin and draw a new something, wanted to ask some questions of his own. He wasn't a good artist, though, and he didn't have the first clue as to how to draw the kind of things he was wondering about, like if she liked this farm town, and if she would stay even after the shoot was over, and if she wanted to maybe marry him one day down the line. Those were the kind of things on his mind. The bartender brought over 2 more beers because the girl's was empty. The boy drank the last half of his fast, some dribbling down his chin in what he hoped was an invisible fashion. The Italian supermodel clapped and said "moo" again, her smile even wider. The farm boy decided he wasn't going to take offense to that it must be a cross in the wires, that maybe moo is Italian for something else altogether. The other girls in this farm town were all he ever knew. They each expected the farm boy to love them because they each talked a lot about the things he was concerned with: dairy and Hinckley, and how to track down an animal that's run away by learning its footprints. He was considered the greatest catch because he never drove a truck while under the influence or catcalled after a girl. He never said much to them anyway. They mistook his quietness for mystery. He just wished they had something else to talk about, but couldn't himself think of a worthy topic of conversation. Each swore to her father she'd end up with him in the end. They were all fine and pretty. They all looked the same. If the Italian supermodel wouldn't marry him, one of them would. The boy took a big sip of beer, wiped the phone from his mouth and with the back of his hand, and tried to think how he could ask for the girl's name in a drawing. On a fresh napkin, he tried to draw a name tag before realizing it just looked like a rectangle. Then he tried to draw a birth certificate before realizing that just looked like a bigger rectangle with squiggles inside of it. The Italian supermodel watched as the farm boy drew rectangle after rectangle, drinking her beer and laughing to herself about whatever supermodels find funny. Once they had finally walked away from the silo, the leather coat man went one way and the Italian supermodel started in the direction of the farm boy, who was tending to a cow. The farm boy talked more to that cow than just about anybody else in Hinckley. He was then holding a bucket up in front of the cow's eyes and saying, "See, it's empty." He was angry and disappointed. "No milk, see, see." "See," she had said, joining him next to the cow. She took the bucket from his hands like it was a gift. He smiled and stuck out his hand to introduce himself. She placed the bucket back around his wrist. "Where are you from?" he asked. She didn't answer. "Okay, that's good. Let's go to the bar." He set the bucket down, brushed his hands against his jeans, and started walking. She followed. Eventually, the boy gave up on ever learning the Italian supermodel's name and instead drew his best attempt at a camera. It, too, was a rectangle, but it had the circle for a lens and a neck strap and a flashbulb. He passed it over to the girl, not entirely sure what question he was asking her. She looked at it and nodded. The tight bun on top of her head was beginning to come loose, and with each nod, more wisps of hair came undone until it looked like dark confetti was celebrating her face. "See," she said, "see," and lifted her hands to hold an invisible camera in front of the farm boy's face. Smiling her little mouthed smile, the Italian supermodel pretended to adjust the focus. Then she clicked her pointer finger. The boy's face froze. He wished he could really see it, that picture, to know what he looks like when he has so many words collected in his throat, just dying to talk to someone for the first time in his life.